Welcome back to another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm your host, Steven Roy Goodman. I'm here at Otterbein University, where we're going to be speaking about food insecurity, both at Otterbein and around the country. And I've got two guests with me today. Melissa Gilbert, who is the director of the Center for Student Engagement, and Micia Clemmons, who's the assistant director for student engagement. Welcome to both of you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for coming, and thanks for having me at Otterbein. Maybe if we could start with you, Melissa. Where are we? We're at the Promise House.
Yes.
Can you lay the groundwork for this? Why are we having this discussion, and why is there a food center like this at a campus like this?
I sure can, yes. We are at the Promise House at Otterbein, and it is a center, it's a resource center for our students who maybe are experiencing some kind of food insecurity. We started it back in 2015 when students came to us and said, we have lots of issues, financial issues on our campus, and to be successful, food is the number one resource we really need.
And what specifically do you do here?
So the Resource Center is here to help our students access all different kinds of resources. So we have food, we have personal care items, we have school supplies, we also give out emergency grants, and we're a referral center for students who again are experiencing some kind of financial hardship.
Well, and speaking of the hardship, I understand, and I can't find the exact site for this, but I read somewhere that a few years ago that 13% of American students, college students, are food insecure. Is that so?
Certainly the numbers have increased quite high since the pandemic started. So I would say the numbers are probably, I would even dare to say double. And that's just students who are reporting that they're food insecure. We don't have a good sense of the students who aren't reporting that as well.
And how would a student report that to you?
So we have a membership registration process. So there's no eligibility requirements for a student to utilize the Promise House, but we do ask them to fill out a form that gives us a little bit of information about them, the type of things that they like to eat for tracking purposes. So every time that they shop, we track how often they're shopping, we track what students are taking, and those numbers kind of give us a sense of what students are needing and what they're not getting through our other avenues of food.
And are these students who live on campus or students who live off campus?
These are both. So this space is open to any student who is currently admitted into Otterbein University, so that includes commuter students, which we get a lot of shoppers who are commuter students who are shopping not only for themselves, but if they live at home with a family, they're also including items for their family when they're shopping here at the Promise House.
And when they shop at the Promise House, are they paying any money at all, or everything is free here?
So everything is free. Students are allowed to donate if they have food or if they have supplies that we can add to our market, but there is no price on any of the items that they take from this space.
Well, maybe if I could throw this to both of you, I imagine that that there could be a potential stigma of some students saying, well, I don't really have any money and I have to get a banana from the Promise House. How do you deal with that?
That's a great question, and it's something we're really concerned about in higher ed for our students. That what we've done on our campus, Micia mentioned already, there's no eligibility requirements. It's great because if you don't have to prove that you're low income or something like that, it helps our students know then that they can access this space without that stigma. You're not labeled on our campus as a Promise House member that needs to use that space. Our Promise House members are actually volunteers, baristas who are here, staff, faculty, everybody's a member of the Promise House. But also to lower that stigma, one of the things that we've done that we feel is really important is we do pop-up pantries. So we have a really fun bike on campus that has a cart on it with all kinds of food and coffee, and we take that up in front of the library, and that helps every student know that the Promise House is for them. So they can come by, pick up that banana that you talked about, pick up school supplies at the pop-up, and know that the Promise House is there for them.
But what about the opposite? What about students who may abuse the privilege of getting free food? Do you have that as an issue as well?
We have never been concerned about that. It is something that donors and maybe people have asked in the past, but we've been open since 2015, and we've never seen students come in and abuse that privilege. It's something that They know it's here for whatever need that they have, but we have not ever seen students come in and take advantage of the Promise House. Most students are here, they know this is here for their peers, they know that they're supporting their peers here on campus, and they're not going to come in and take anything more than they need.
And I think we should mention that we are actually in a residential part of the campus.
We are.
I thought that was interesting as we were getting set up for today. So it looks like we're in a dorm here.
So I think that goes back to your question about reducing the stigma. So this space actually used to be a lobby to the apartment that a lot of our students live in. But we decided to make this space as much like a cafe, to help when students walk into this space that they're not feeling like they're in a pantry, soup kitchen. They're here in an extended, welcoming home space at Otterbein. So the space, we wanted to be large enough where we could put tables around where students can gather, do homework, eat together, to build community with each other.
So like this table is a table that you use all the time?
Yes, a lot of our students, especially our volunteers, our baristas, when they do their shifts here, sometimes they'll stay after their shift and eat and do homework, have their friends meet them. It really brings more of a community sense to the space.
But speaking of the community, I mean, this might be too assertive a question, but if so many students are food insecure, what's the responsibility, in your view, for this university and other universities to perhaps kick in more money to prevent some of that?
We're very concerned about that, and on our campus, we are here as a college of opportunity, and we feel, I think, in higher education that one of the things that we can do is provide tuition, we can provide housing. We also have meal plans that are very accessible for our students, but there are a lot of hidden costs to college. Things like personal care items. Students expect to pay for books. They know that's coming, they know that's an expense. But personal care items, things that happen with their cars, we're much more than just food. We're here as a center in case they're experiencing some kind of financial hardship. And we do feel it's our university responsibility to step up and help those students. We can't do everything for students, but we try to be a wraparound service. So when our students, anything that they're experiencing in terms of financial hardship, sometimes they don't know that when they're coming in. So we provide everything we possibly can for students who in some way are lacking opportunity with their finances and that ability to get to college, but we get them here, we open the door, provide tuition, provide a housing plan, provide a very reasonable meal plan if they accept that. However, sometimes students don't want a meal plan. And so we're a different kind of a resource for those students.
And what about the confidentiality? So let's say you guys run this center, so if a student privately says to you, I'm having this difficulty, what do you do?
Yeah, so all of our navigators, as we like to call them, so we have baristas who operate the logistics of the Promise House and keeping it maintained, welcoming volunteers. Each of them, when they're getting trained, they sign a confidentiality form. So any forms that they're looking at regarding our students, any conversations that they have signed a document saying that they will keep it confidential. And then we have our navigators. Our navigators are the people that we have volunteers kind of, escort our students to if they have concerns that are beyond just shopping at the market. That the navigators will help them kind of find other resources around Central Ohio, around the city of Westerville that might help them. And in that process, they also are very trained on how to have these difficult conversations with students, recognizing that some of them don't feel comfortable talking about these things, and that these matters are only to be shared if there's something in danger where it needs to be involved at higher administrative level.
And how often does that happen?
So a part of our emergency funding process. So a student can apply to receive assistance funding in an emergency situation. So a lot of students who apply usually are students who have to get a parking pass, Those are one of those unrealized costs that they have to, come up with when they come to a university, in addition to their textbooks. So they fill out this form. A navigator has a private conversation with them and talk through that process of what is this expense for? How can we best utilize our resources to help you? And then that information goes straight to one of our staff. So there's no other parties involved. It's a pretty straightforward kind of line in terms of communication. The navigator speaks with that student, that goes to the staff who needs to look at it, and then we help them in their need.
And do you find that more male or female students come to the Promise House?
We're a little bit more females in terms of our student population anyway, but I do think we still see more females here than we do males. I think you brought up the stigma to begin with, and I think some of our students, they learn about the Promise House, they're connected. Most of the students who work here are actually females too, so I think we've got a bigger circle of female students who are involved and connected. But we do see some of our fraternity houses, they've understood that we're also a resource, and some of those students that live in our fraternity houses on campus are some of our under-resourced students. It's a really beautiful place to live. They know they can get connected with their peers, so we do see some males that come over from that population of students. We also see some of our student athletes, so we're right next to the track over here and our football field, so we often see some of our athletes coming over to grab a granola bar or something after practice. That's, I think, where we see most of our male students.
And I realize you represent Otterbein, not other universities, but how would you think about Otterbein compared to other universities in Ohio? Are there more food insecure students here than other Ohio campuses?
I really think it's about the same. We're seeing at Otterbein, we have about 32% of our students are Pell eligible. And when you look at higher ed in Ohio, a lot of our independents colleges are probably around that same. We might see a little bit more because we are a college of opportunity. So we're providing many more grants to our students to be able to access higher education at our institution. But we're seeing on most campuses, your big state schools, places like that, you could be up to 40 or 50% of those students who have experienced some kind of food insecurity. So I think we're pretty on par, about 32% students who are coming in under-resourced and looking for different kinds of opportunities on their campuses.
But if we came from Mars right now and came to Earth, and you said that the wealthiest country in the world with all these great universities has 30% of the students who are food insecure, that's a really high number. Am I missing something?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think it's a question that our society is yet to come to terms with, that there are a lot of people who are food insecure. And so I think it's a lot of other conversations that have to be involved. I think a big part of the success of the Promise House is we have a great relationship with our community members. They invest time, they invest monetary donations, they invest other types of donations. That helps create a bigger conversation around that very idea of why are students having to worry about food. Their main concern should be attending their classes, getting their degrees so that they can go on to do all the great things that we want them to do. And so I would say the more that you get your community involved, the more opportunity to have those conversations and to really plan out. Because, as much as we love the Promise House and what it does, we do recognize it is a Band-Aid. A lot of the, needs that we meet are temporary fixes. And so there involves a lot more people at the table to be having, coming up with solutions for us to think more long-term and more sustainable.
Well, let's look at some of those possible solutions. So is there an association of, I don't mean it's just Ohio, but around the country of people who, or administrators or universities who run Promise houses, food pantries, services for food insecure students?
There's a national association that connects all of us in terms of food banks on campuses. And it's really helpful because we have a network of people who are thinking about not just food insecurity on our campuses, but what it looks like in our communities. And as Micia said, it's not just bringing together higher ed professionals to do that work, but pulling in our neighbors, our resource centers, our food pantries in neighborhoods to be our partners in this work. And I think that's the beauty of what's happened with this movement is it started absolutely with food pantries in communities. Your local pantry down the street that helps your neighbors. But then when we started seeing that happen on campus, we created partnerships. So now our entire network is not just higher ed partners, but a broader network of people across the country working on food insecurity.
So you mentioned that national organization. So that national organization that helps all the food banks, what sorts of things are they doing on a public policy basis on a national level? What are they doing as far as you may know?
Yeah, that's a really important piece, that we're not just looking at the Band-Aid here at Otterbein, but what do we need to do at a policy level to assist our students? And one of the most important things that National Association has done is helped us to leverage food SNAP benefits is what it's called now. It used to be called food stamps. But to be able to get the federal government to support our students with SNAP benefits. That's a brand new initiative on most college campuses, and it's made sure that students who are work-study Pell eligible can apply to get SNAP benefits that they can then use at a grocery store to provide food for their table.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. So a student who just goes, not to here, but to the regular big supermarket a few miles from where we're sitting, what do? You're saying they get some sort of piece of paper or some sort of coupon that says you can now be used?
Yeah, so if you're an under-resourced student, just like a member of a community who meets a certain eligibility criteria, hits the 200% of the poverty line, for example, that person can normally go to a food bank. They can access other kind of federal resources. That student can now access those resources, which means they get their SNAP benefit card. They can take that into the grocery store and get a certain amount of food with that card.
Now, of course, the counterpoint to this, presumably there's be some political pushback to this, so can students use that to buy alcohol? Can students use it to buy unhealthy foods?
I will say that this goes back to the importance of community effort. So Westerville, so the city where Otterbein is located, they have a annual food farmers market. That is a market where we get vendors from all over Central Ohio that bring fresh produce, fresh food. They have made it possible for students or anyone who has food stamps or SNAP to utilize their card to, have access to really good quality produce, straight from the farm food. And so in terms of policy, I think the more you get community members involved, there's opportunity to create, those pipelines for people to get access to some quality food, quality things. And it goes back to what we talked about before. I think when you're creating resources for people, people won't take advantage of that if you give them the resources they need. So our students here, we create this space trusting that they'll utilize it when they need it, and they reciprocate that. And I think that can also be reflected on a larger scale.
And you keep referencing community, which I think is an interesting point. So how would you go about, if you were an administrator for another university watching this today, and you were trying to set something up, well, where would you go in the community to begin these kind of relationships that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I would say first start with your students. What we did to start the Promise House was we had a conversation with students. They have the best pulse on their needs and what their peers are saying, so start there. And then look around your community. What food banks are around? What other grassroots organizations? There are a lot of collective organizations in towns all across America. Get in touch with them. Be at the meetings. Have the conversation about, this is a need that our students are expressing. What are your ideas? And you'd be surprised to see what solutions people come up with.
And do you agree with that?
I do. I was going to immediately say your food banks. There's usually in every state and every city, there's associations of food banks, and those are your best partners in this work. They have done this before. They know how to run a market, they know how to run a pantry, they know what other kinds of resources their clients need, and that's so critical, is that understanding, and I think our pantries helped us to understand this, that food insecurity is a bigger issue than just being hungry. It is something where our students are trying to access different kinds of resources in their community, and not having a granola bar usually means you might also have a flat tire, you might also have trouble purchasing your books, and our food pantries, our partners in that network, they understand that it's a wraparound kind of model that you need. You have to address all these other resources. And they've been our best partners in figuring out who those resources are and how to connect our students to those.
Do you have anything like where a certain percentage of your income, if you work at Otterbein, is expected to be donated to something like the Promise House?
There's no expectation here at Otterbein that that would happen. However, we have so many partners on our campus. We usually tap into a network of our departments, our academic departments, and those departments have done all kinds of educational programs for the Promise House. So we ask more of the talent of our current employees than we do of their funding. We bring in people here who have expertise in nutrition, for example, and help our students understand how they can prepare a really healthy meal with a box of rice from our pantry and some bananas and some other kinds of fruit or vegetables that we might bring in. So those nutrition experts, bringing in faculty, staff who have some expertise to help us out has been really important. And then every single department on campus also has a Promise House box where we collect donations of food. And most departments, it's not that they compete with one another, but most departments are really excited every week to try to get all of the food that they can, and some of them actually adopt a certain item like spaghetti sauce or body wash, something that they know that our students need, and they collect just that for us.
What would you say to a university president who is thinking about setting up something like this? What would you do? What advice would you give to them?
I think the partnership piece is important for sure, making sure you're connected with your resources in the community first, but also talk to your alumni. Talk with your alums who's connected already into different kinds of spaces that can provide resources for our students. Get them involved. You're also going to need to build a donor base. There's no doubt that to run a center like this and to have the kind of resources to provide emergency grants for students, funding that it's not a loan, but it's something that they get, that they can use those funds to provide help within a crisis. But I would speak out to your, connect with your alums, find a solid donor base to get involved, but make sure you're talking with your government officials, your community partners, people who run your job and family services. What does that look like in your city, and how can you become partners with those people?
And before, I suppose, you have those conversations, if you don't mind roughly estimating, how much yearly would you need to run an efficient food bank?
It depends on the extent of what you're trying to do. If it's just a food bank, if all you're doing is providing food for your students, you're probably looking at about $5,000 in terms of that inventory for the course of a year, because you're going to get donations from your other constituents, so food-wise. But if you're trying to expand that and provide the wraparound services like we do here, it's extensive. Our students during COVID tapped into nearly $15,000-$20,000 worth of emergency grants. So having those kinds of funds to be able to support students who experience that tyranny of the moment, that chaos in their life, where they need to step up and find some other funding, that's important. So again, looking at the student as a whole person, understanding there's going to be an intersection with those other needs is going to take far more funding than the $5,000 worth of food that we put on shelves.
Can I add something? Also thinking about the people who are going to staff it.
Yes.
A big part of the funding when we're talking about sustainable solutions, when the students leave after they've graduated, who will be running the Promise House? We rely a lot on our students. And so if you're thinking about bringing this to your institution, I think a big part of your funding should also be thought into how are you going to staff it, who are going to be in charge of maintaining, especially if you're trying to grow into all-encompassing resource hub. Having that kind of behind your thinking is really important.
And that really brings up another really important staffing issue, and on our campus, one of those places you'd want to touch bases immediately is AmeriCorps. We have always had an AmeriCorps member here at the Promise House who helps us tap into all different kinds of poverty initiatives around the country and has been a really important partner. And they manage the Promise House, and then our work study students and other students employed by the university get some cash to help them out, but also phenomenal skills in how to run a nonprofit.
Well, thank you both very much. You do great work, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you. If you would like additional information about the Promise House at Otterbein University, please go to otterbein.edu. If you'd like to send a note to me at the show, please go ahead and send an email to highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. And thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.